Thank you all for being here this morning. We are here to speak about the surrender, the arrest, the beginning of the prosecution of a man named Michael Vahey, V-A-H-E-Y. Mr. Vahey is responsible for the death of Dr. Barbara Freitas, who was riding her bicycle at 18th and Spruce when she was struck by Vahey, who was driving his vehicle. Evidence in this case, only recently available, has established that he was intoxicated, that he had alcohol in his system at twice the legal limit. It was essentially a 0.16 blood alcohol level. The legal limit is 0.08. There's a lot to say about this, but I want to make sure that you know that we have been in close contact with the family of Dr. Freitas. We are aware of what they have to do now, and that, of course, is to take care of all the family aspects of the death of Dr. Freitas. I'd like to introduce some of the people who are with us today. Then I have a few comments, and I will get out of the way and let some other people speak. We are honored to have with us today Philadelphia Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel, whose police department did an excellent job with this investigation and continues to investigate certain aspects of the case that will illuminate how we prosecute it and whatever the final decisions are on charging. We have with us Ben Waxman, State Representative of the 182nd Legislative District, Jesse West, Executive Director of the Neighborhood Bike Works, Christopher Gale, Executive Director of the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, Nicole Brunet, Policy Director for the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. From the District Attorney's Office, we have First Assistant Bob Listenby, we have ADA Joanne Pescator, and we have the prosecutor who will personally handle this matter, and that is ADA Katie Wood of the DAO's Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit, who is now serving as an assistant supervisor. We have with us Gabriel Rainey from Central Division Victim Services, who is doing great work with the family. And we also have representatives from the Office of Council President Kenyatta Johnson and Council Member Jamie Gauthier. In a moment, I'm going to call up Katie Wood and Joanne Pescator to lay out some of the facts that we have on this case, explain what the charges are at this time. I can tell you that as we speak, Mr. Vahey is in custody. He surrendered last night, and he is awaiting a preliminary arraignment, which we expect to happen later today. At that arraignment, the District Attorney's Office will be seeking high bail, despite the fact that this defendant has no prior record. Obviously, the crime is horrible. The outcome is almost unspeakable. Today, we are gathered together to explain some developments in the vehicular death of Dr. Barbara Freitas, which occurred on the 17th of July, 2024. Our thoughts, of course, are with the family, as our communications have been as well. I have directed our chief of the DAO's Homicide Non-Fatal Shooting Unit and our team also to speak to the spouse of Dr. Freitas. This has occurred, and we are in close contact with them. When they have more time, we will be meeting in person with them and discussing in detail all aspects of the case. One of the most important things that we do early in a case is to reach out to survivors, reach out to family members to try to make sure they have the information and support that they need, and there often is a whole list of kinds of support that they need. It is my hope that we're able not only to provide that support with our partners who do victim witness services, but that we're able to provide it moving forward in ways we may not even understand are necessary just yet. At this time, I'm going to call forward ADA Joanne Pescator and the attorney who will prosecute it, ADA Katie Wood to lay out the specifics of certain facts about the case and also to lay out for you what the charges are at this time.
Thank you, DA Krasner. Good morning. First of all, our condolences to the doctor's family. We spoke to the doctor's mother and father and spouse last night, myself and Gabriella Rainey from Central Victim Services. As the DA said, this is a horrific crime. Back on July 17th, Michael Vahey was operating his car at a high rate of speed on Spruce Street when he struck Dr. Freitas, who was legally in the bike lane where she should have been. He struck her with such impact that he threw her body at least 150 feet, and she was dead probably then. He was traveling at least 57 miles an hour when he struck Dr. Freitas. He also almost struck another pedestrian as well. The charges that have been approved by the DA himself are homicide by vehicle while DUI, homicide by vehicle, involuntary manslaughter, driving under the influence of alcohol, recklessly endangering another person, reckless driving, and exceeding the speed limit. From this point forward, after the arraignment is completed and bail is set in this particular case, no matter what the bail is, if it's not what the DA's office has asked for, we will be appealing that. The defendant will then face a preliminary hearing in this matter. It's usually 7 to 10 days from the arraignment. ADA Katie Wood will be assigned to that case. We are working diligently with the Crash Investigation Division and Officer Dominic, who did a phenomenal job in this case. We are asking the public, if you have any information in this case, video, cell phone, anything that you know about this case that could be helpful, to call either one of us or call the Crash Investigation Division and give us that information.
Thank you.
In terms of some of the specific factual findings that we have at this point, thanks to the excellent investigation done by the police department, I can tell you that we have video evidence, we have other electronic and technological evidence that shows at a minimum the following. At the time the doctor and her bicycle were struck, the striking vehicle driven by Mr. Vahey was in the bike lane where it is not permitted to be. It was traveling, we believe, in excess of 50 miles an hour. The speed limit there, I understand to be 25 miles an hour. The vehicle, in addition to striking and killing the doctor, struck multiple other cars, came to rest. Vahey was in the driver's seat and was removed from the car after the accident. And obviously all of that taken together is a crime, and it's unacceptable, and the consequences horrible. And we intend to prosecute this case justly and vigorously, and to do what we can not only to make sure that there is accountability in this case, but do what we can to make sure that we do not have these accidents in the future to the extent we can. In just a moment, Philadelphia Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel will have a couple of words. And we will then hear from a legislator, Ben Waxman, and from representatives of important nonprofits that work for the safety of cyclists, for the availability of bike lanes, for the future of cycling, which is obviously big in every major city in the United States. They will come up in this order: Commissioner Bethel, who's been such a wonderful partner to this office, State Representative Ben Waxman, then Christopher Gale and Nicole Brunet will come up together from the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, and we will then hear from Jesse West of Neighborhood Bike Works.
So good morning, everyone. First and foremost, let me begin by giving my condolences to the Dr. Freitas and her family. Not just her family, but the CHOP family as well. As someone who spent with a daughter with sickle cell disease, I spent over 2 decades in and out of CHOP and understand the impact the doctors have on the community they serve. And so that's a testament to who she was and her work. And I give all credit to her. And so I give my condolences to both the family and the child. As has already been outlined, we recognize the importance of safety across the city. Part of my charge under Mayor Parker is all things safety. I know oftentimes we focus on the violence and the shootings and the homicides. But my charge as the commissioner is to be working effectively to deal with all issues of safety. I mean, over the last 5 years, we've already arrested almost 10,000 individuals for DUI over the last 5 years. So that tells you the impact that driving and the impaired in the state has on our community. And this is that shows you what happens when someone who's under the influence gets behind the wheel of a car, and now we have a tragic death. This is the first fatality of a bicyclist this year, but we've had over 29 individuals and pedestrians who've been killed by cars. And so we have a duty to continue to work hard, work in collaboration with our partners here today and others to make our city safe, not just from the perspective of violence, but the vehicles that we see every day. Many of you know we've increased our enforcement around particular corridors, around Broad Street and along our Roosevelt Boulevard corridor and other areas. We'll continue to expand that work as we move forward. I know, we've increased our vehicle stops and TVRs in an effort to get people to settle down as they drive through our city. But we have a lot of work to do. As was mentioned to me in the meeting one death is too many. And so we will continue to work diligently with our partners. I do want to thank the district attorney and his team for their collaboration, and our crash investigation division for their hard work, working collaborative as a team to bring about this arrest and continue that work forward. Thank you, everyone.
Well, first, I guess the first thing I want to say, I'm State Representative Ben Waxman. I represent Center City, Philadelphia, where this incident occurred and where the victim lived. And I guess the first thing is just, our tremendous just sorrow to express to the victim's family and that this occurred and that this was a terrible loss from our city. I also just want to take a moment and thank our law enforcement who were here today, both the Philadelphia Police Department and the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, who worked tirelessly to get this thing in a place where they could make charges and an arrest. I especially want to commend the DA's office and the police department for just being so aggressive about communicating with the public about this incident and what was happening to make sure that people could follow a case where there was a lot of interest from the public in what was happening. I don't have a lot more to say. I'll say, being a person who represents Center City, Philadelphia, it is hard sometimes in Harrisburg and quite frankly in other parts of the city to not feel a little bit invisible. And what I mean by that is that there are many, many people who live in Center City, not just come here for work, not just come here for play, but live in the center part of this city downtown. And those people, I'm one of them, mostly get around by walking. They mostly get around on bikes. They get around in ways that are the alternatives to the way that a lot of people get around, especially cars. It is important that people remember that people whose primary mode of transportation is a bike, is walking, they have a right to safety. They have a right to be able to get themselves where they are going without fearing that they are going to die. This is an extraordinary case in a lot of ways, and the fact that we have a defendant who apparently was intoxicated when this occurred, but it should be just a reminder, not only of the facts of this case, but of the need to make sure that our city is a safe place for people who are getting around in all kinds of different ways, and to remember that walking, riding a bike, taking other forms of transportation that aren't a car, public transportation, these are real ways that people get around. We cannot forget that. And when something like this happens, it's a stark reminder of just how horrible things can get when we refuse to acknowledge the reality of the diversity in the ways that people, get around this city. So with that, I just want to again, say thank you to the DA's office, to the police department for the excellent work that they did. Hopefully it'll be a long time before I'm standing here again on a case like this.
Good morning. I'm Chris Gale. I'm with the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, and I'm joined with
Nicole Brunet, Policy Director of the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia.
So for context, first of all, we are also our thoughts are with the victim's family. This is a terrible tragedy that has affected our community deeply, as was seen Sunday morning at the vigil. And so we continue to do this work. For the last 50 years, the Bicycle Coalition has been fighting for bike lanes and better bike lanes throughout the city. And in 2009, we won a huge battle by convincing the city to build bike lanes river to river on Spruce and Pine, and really held those up as an example of a great thing that the city can do, and yet we're still here with this tragedy today. So we're going to continue fighting for this in Center City and beyond. We want to see all of this throughout the rest of the city, infrastructure that's safer for cyclists, for pedestrians, and everybody using the road.
Yeah, in 2009, we also recommended a protected bike lane on Spruce and Pine, and that request was rejected. We are once again asking our city officials, decision makers, to invest in Vision Zero and build protected bike lanes, real protected bike lanes all over the city for vulnerable users, for drivers, for the safety of all Philadelphians. We are also asking our state officials to stop dragging their feet and allow parking protected bike lanes on state roads. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Jessie West. I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood Bike Works, and I want to express my condolences to the family and friends. This heartbreaking event has brought to the forefront the critical issue of cycling safety on our streets. This incident underscores a critical issue we encounter daily at Neighborhood Bike Works. Every week, 20 to 40 youth are entrusted to us. And at NBW, we prioritize safe biking. We teach our youth essential city street riding skills and hold them accountable for maintaining those standards during our programs. Our programs take youth across the city and onto the circuit trails, and ensuring their safety on city streets is our utmost priority and our primary concern. However, there's only so much that we can do to protect our youth and teach them how to protect themselves. Drivers must be aware of cyclists, respect their presence, adhere to laws and measures designed to protect cyclists, and be held accountable when cyclists are harmed or killed. We need to advocate for better infrastructure, such as dedicated bike lanes, which would provide concrete or hard barriers to protect cyclists from being hit by cars, improved signage and safer intersections, and alternatively, as a less costly measures, separated bike lanes, where cyclists would be protected by a line of cars. These measures can significantly reduce the risk of accidents and make our streets more safe and welcoming for cyclists. Barbara's tragic death underscores that there is more work to be done. Let us use this moment not as a point of blame, but as a call to action to improve safety measures and seek justice for cyclists like Barbara.
Thank you all for your comments. Thank you all for your partnership to do whatever we can, A, to have accountability for this event, but B, to prevent this event from occurring again as much as is possible. We have received a couple of persistent questions. I'll go to them first, and then I will go through all the journalists who are here. If I miss you, we'll stop at the end so that you have an opportunity to ask your questions. One of the things that we've been hearing a lot is the question, what's the biggest challenge in prosecuting crash death cases? Other people said, why did it take so long? You know, there's a couple answers to that, but one that I think everybody should understand is that car accident cases involving fatalities also involve a lot of forensics. It can involve, for example, having to take a blood sample or a urine sample to test it for who knows what. Maybe alcohol, maybe drugs. Which drugs? That can and often does take a good amount of time. Sometimes what is going on is there is the breaking down of a cell phone to determine geolocation so that we can establish exactly who was in the moving vehicle. Sometimes we are looking at some of the technology in the vehicle itself to see what it shows us as to the use of brake pedal, as to the use of gas pedal, as to route, as to speed over an extended period of time. And then, of course, you often have people who are injured. In this case, there were people who were injured during the crash, and that may have its effect as well. So those are among the challenges, but I believe there's a bigger challenge, which is that I don't actually think the criminal justice system does a very good job with vehicular accidents. We all understand that there's this sort of a fuzzy line between an accident that's not a crime and a crash that is a crime. I should say crash for both. We understand that there are crashes that are more accidental in nature and then others that are more criminal in nature. But recklessness can be criminal. Negligence can be criminal. So in my opinion, and I've said this many times before and I'll say it again, I don't think that the criminal justice system is great at differentiating between criminal acts and ones that are subject to civil liability. And so sometimes we don't have the toolkit of charges available that ideally we would like to see. In terms of, we've also had a lot of questions about what are the strategies for curbing these types of incidents in the future. I think that we have heard pretty eloquently from a lot of those who are most interested in cycling safety and in pedestrian safety about some of these ideas, but I'm a simple guy. I'm going to go back to kindergarten here. Not everybody knows what a protected bike lane is. Not everybody's seen them in Center City. Not everybody's been to Manhattan and seen what goes on there in terms of protected lanes. Some of these lanes are protected by a cement barrier or some other kind of barrier that is going to push back on a car that is trying to cross into the lane. There's little doubt that if that kind of barrier had existed here, that Dr. Freitas might be alive today. There's little doubt that that would have made a very substantial difference. There is another way that this is frequently done, and it's a way that's been effective in large cities. That is to use other objects such as planters, and we do have locations in Philadelphia there are large, heavy cement planters, and while it's not a continuous barrier, it's still an obstacle, it's still a barrier that will impact a vehicle that is veering into the bike lane. And then, of course, as many of you know from Market Street, a state road, as was mentioned earlier, but a state road where a pilot has been permitted, sometimes it's just a question of moving the parking lane from the curb, moving it away from the curb the width of a bike lane. So the bike lane is in between the curb and the parked cars. The parked cars in an area of high-density parking are going to provide that barrier, and it is in many ways a lower cost, speedy, and efficient way to try to provide more protection to people in an urban center who are riding in bike lanes. Those are a couple questions we had, and now I'm sure there are some even better ones from Ray Strickland of Channel 3 CBS.
Right here, sir.
Yes, sir.
I know you just kind of detailed the challenges of this case, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm sure there's been cases where a drunk driver was arrested at the scene. Can you explain the difference in a case like that where the person was arrested at the scene versus this one where there's a few days that went by before this person was arrested?
Well, you know, I don't have every detail on that, but I know this. The driver went to the hospital, and he was there for a while. You know, obviously, police have an obligation to save lives. And that obligation is even higher than speeding up an investigation by a day or two. They did that here in the same way they scoop people from shootings all the time, which has proven to be an excellent and important policy. It saves a lot of lives. So I certainly would never fault them for that. Are there any other questions, Mr. Strickland?
Good.
You're good. All right. Annie McCormick, Channel 6. Oh, of course, of course.
Very quickly, I mean, these are very complex investigations, you know, and we have to take them, and, you know, it's a homicide, right? I mean, someone was killed by a vehicle. We're going to treat it in that manner. There's blood work that has to be retrieved at that location. There's warrants that have to be submitted to get that retrieval, and we have to make sure we go through a very methodical process to ensure that when we work with the district attorney's office and his team, and they're guiding us in this work, that we are making sure that we have a very strong case. And so the immediacy is not about blowing into and getting back a breathalyzer. We have to have a much more complex process so ensure that we have a strong case. Thank you.
Thank you. Annie McCormick, Channel 6 ABC.
I have a question for the coalition and also Representative Waxman. The coalition may know more about this, and some of this legislation may predate Representative Waxman, but I believe that in 2020, the Senate Transportation Committee passed, but it never made it to the floor, legislation that would be specific to the curbing that Mr. Krasner just explained, to the concrete. And it sounds that the not happy meeting, but the compromise was for the
flex post.
Are you thinking about, I mean, this is Senate legislation, are you thinking about trying to get on lawmakers to reintroduce that legislation? And can you speak on that?
So the flex posts were put in by the city. So they were put in on Spruce and Pine after Emily Fredericks was killed on 11th and Spruce in a right hook turn. At the time, the city moved the bike lane to the left side of the street and eventually in 2019 added the flex posts at the corners to slow down drivers making the turn. They're flexible, they're meant to be driven over, and they really don't do much to slow down drivers. As it pertains to the parking protected bike lane legislation, it has been introduced in 3 separate sessions. So yes, predating Representative Waxman. It has passed the House 2 sessions. In 2022, it did pass the Senate, but there was an amendment that was the SEPTA Special Prosecutor Amendment, which eventually was passed this year. That amendment, because of that amendment, it was vetoed by Governor Wolf at the time. So we had to reintroduce the legislation in 2023.
And any plans, just as a quick follow-up, any plans to move forward with any new legislation, even from the House?
We have a long history, at least in the House Democratic Caucus, in advocating for a lot of different measures that would. Oh, I'm sorry. I should know that. I'm sorry. Let me start over. So there's a long history, right, in both the House Democratic Caucus and in the Senate of supporting these measures, right? So certainly from where I'm standing, there could be that this incident might galvanize that conversation. But I would say that because we won't be back until, our next day is, mid-September when we're back in session. So certainly nothing is going to happen between now and then. And we did have various legislation that did pass out of the House and is stalled, in the Senate. And so that's sort of where things are politically right now to give you the landscape. We had some things that moved their way through the process but didn't get included in the final budget agreement, similar to the transit dollars that we were trying to get. But I expect that all of that is going to be up for conversation when we return in the fall.
And I'll just add that on behalf of the Bicycle Coalition, because we've been leading this fight, like Nicole said, for years, we're committed to it. We're going to keep fighting for these protected bike lanes, parking protected bike lanes, and better protection for cyclists and pedestrians statewide, but especially in Philadelphia.
All right, thank you. Isabel Sanchez, Channel 10 Telemundo. Okay. Estamos aquí para anunciar el arresto de Michael Vahey, quien mató a una mujer que manejaba su bicicleta a las 18 y Spruce el día 20, creo que fue el día 24. Los cargos incluyen homicidio por una persona que estaba borracho en el momento cuando él la mató y otros cargos de ese estilo. En español. Ok. De acuerdo. Yo amo mi bicicleta, lo uso muchas veces y es importantísimo que las personas que están usando sus bicicletas van de una modo segura. El uso de la fila de bicicletas es una manera buena de asegurar que están más seguros, pero estamos aquí además de eso para discutir los detalles de cómo podemos mejorar estas filas de bicicletas, incluso por protegerlos con construcción. Sorry, it's not my day in Spanish. Sorry, doing what I can. All right, thank you. If I mispronounce your name, please tell me. Shoben McGurl. Oh, all right. We'll come back. John Leonard, Channel 17. No question. Thank you. Kelly Rule, 29.
The driver had a
I know the answer, but why don't we let the people prosecuting the case give it?
Good morning, everyone. The defendant, Mr. Vahey, did not have any prior arrests for DUI, any other prior criminal contacts at all. He did have a traffic record, nothing serious, nothing in the past 10 years.
And this might be for the coalition or whoever goes to the answer, but you kind of touched on this, Mr. Krasner, but when we're talking about an allegedly intoxicated driver driving 57 miles per hour down the Spruce Street, could anything truly protect the driver from driving that out? Sorry.
Yes, concrete would do a really good job. Also, I think to note, if we had a continuous concrete protected bike lane on Spruce, the driver wouldn't have been able to swerve into the bike lane to begin with.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or? Good, okay. Kristen Johansson, KYW.
Probably just ask those my questions, I'm good.
Okay, very good. Nathaniel Rosenberg. Hi.
So this question is not directly about Dr. Freed, but Christopher Sorensen, the man who fatally struck a pedestrian, Christopher Rivera of Kensington, the same night. So our records have also not been charged yet in his death. Do you intend to charge him for the fatal crash? Are you awaiting toxicology results? And are those, if you are, those commercial things?
Let me just say this, we're not going to comment on that case at this time, out of respect for the family members of the doctor, but we are very careful and very deliberate, and so are the police department, as they should be in all these cases, to make sure that we know exactly what we're doing when we charge them. We take all cases involving vehicular deaths, all cases involving injury and death to cyclists extremely seriously. And that is true regardless of neighborhood, it's true regardless of victim. So we will have more information on that at a later time. Do you have anything else, Mr. Rosenberg?
Yes, I was just going to ask if you could explain the reason you described, the process of getting to these charges, but also why you didn't file charges, or why you generally don't file charges in the absence of a toxicology report.
Well, great question. Thank you for that. So it is very important that we know not only whether a substance is involved, but we know what substance is involved. There are separate criminal charges, or at least separate subsections of these charges, depending upon what the psychoactive substance is, whether it is a particular drug, whether it is alcohol. It is also true that there are occasions, rare but real, where a terrible crash may be the result of a medical event. You may have a driver who suffers a heart attack or a stroke, who is in acute what do they call that? I forget what they call it, but it is a condition that some diabetics have where as a consequence of their disease, they may have a very problematic moment when they're behind the wheel. That has to be determined, it has to be ruled out in order for us to have probable cause. We can't just guess. We have to actually have the facts that will support it. So we're careful about that. And needless to say, when someone is hospitalized, generally speaking, that's not the best time to be doing a bail hearing. It's usually as soon as they get out, which is close to what is occurring here. All right, let me see. Jack Tomchuk. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you mentioned a high bail that's going to be asked. Can you detail what that amount will be seeking?
Yes, I spent time myself going over the videos and the paperwork and some of the forensics in this case when we were figuring out exactly what charges were supported as of this part of the investigation. It is possible that with further investigation there may be some others, but that's where we are right now. We also discussed the bail. The bail that we're going to seek is $1 million, and if we do not get it, we're going to appeal if there is a bail that is below $1 million in this case.
This might be for you or for the police department. Do you have any trend or data showing the trends in pedestrian and cyclist accidents, whether that's been increasing recent years, decreasing, stable?
Yeah, I have to admit we had this interesting discussion a little bit earlier. I'm going to rely on the commissioner if he wishes to address it. I'm also going to rely on the cycling organizations who have a better grasp of this data.
So I'm cautious to provide data. I mean, you know, for me, I stand in this moment thinking about Dr. Frieda and her family, thinking about a young lady who was raised and went this far and was taken away because someone decided to use alcohol. So I prefer to, if you don't mind, I'll do that offline. If you want to have those specific stats, I'll provide you for the stats. But I don't think, in my moment standing here, it's about a trend line as to what happened. It's about her death, about working with the DA's office to bring that person to justice and how we can move forward. And so I mean, I may push back a little bit. I'm not pushing back. I can get you that data. My team will get you the data on trend lines and what we're seeing. Just numbers in and of itself doesn't give that justice, because there's so many people who we've already lost. Last year we had 10 bicyclists who were killed on. So I just want to give it true justice and not just give you some static numbers.
Thank you, Commissioner. We will do the same thing, so let us know. We'll provide the information, follow up with us. But yeah, we have those stats and we'll happily share those as well.
All right, Matt Cassidy. Nothing? All right, thank you. Mike Tannenbaum.
I don't know if you had mentioned, was there a BAC that?
Yes, there was a BAC. The alcohol in his blood was 0.16. That is essentially 2 times the legal limit, which is 0.08. Do you have any other questions, sir? All right. Did I miss anybody? Is there anyone else? Univision. All right. Univision, do you have a question? Yes.
I have a couple of questions. First, how is working your office and the police department under temporary plates, because sometimes they are involved in these kind of crimes? Can you do it in Spanish?
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
So the question, I want to make sure I understand it. You're asking how is the work between the DA's office and...
Sorry, before other officials say that the power is under the states, not in Philadelphia. So because the legislator have to work in that, what is your message to them?
A message about temporary license plates? Is that the question?
Because other officials say that it's under the legislator, not any municipal laws.
It would depend on what you're talking.
May I assist as your interpreter? Is that okay?
See, that's about the best you're going to get from me. So, 2 parts.
Those partes.
We recognize that we have a lot of illegal and inappropriate, temporary tags that we see across the city.
Hay muchos tags que no son legales en la ciudad.
As a result of that, working actually with our partners in New York, who put together a very comprehensive intelligence packet, we share that information with our men and women in the field.
Estamos trabajando con Nueva York con un paquete de información, inteligencia que tenemos en las calles.
To be able to identify those tags that are inappropriate, particularly the paper tags.
Para identificar los tags ilegales o falsos.
And have increased our enforcement as a result.
Y hemos crecido arrestos y cargos como un resultado.
All right. Second question, Mr. Attorney, is what different have is possible in Spanish this case with others?
Todos los casos tienen sus detalles específicos, únicos, la hora, si hay luz o no, si tenemos un vehículo legal o no, si la persona tiene una historia penal o no. Pero en mi pensamiento, este caso es distinto por muchas razones, pero es igualmente horrible a las víctimas y a sus familiares. All right, it's a big trial.
Ralph, just through go to.
Yeah, I don't know that we can say Okay, Mr. Cipriano, big trouble.
My question is for Police Commissioner Bethel. Good afternoon, sir.
How are you?
I'm fine. I have a simple question. Do you agree with the district attorney's decision not to seek the death penalty in the execution-style murder of Temple Police Officer Christopher?
I have no comment regarding that. Chris was a part of my family. I attended his funeral, carried his walk with his grandmother through that process, and that would be inappropriate for me to have a conversation in this place at this time with you about that matter. But I appreciate your question. Thank you.
All right, thank you all.